Welcome to another episode of Systematic Geekology. This is a space where we seek to create and cultivate healthy conversations between those things we geek out on and the philosophical and theological questions that often arise out of our fandoms. Like, what does it mean to be human? What makes a hero? What makes a villain? How do the stories and narratives we geek out on shape how we live in the world? We are your priest to the geeks. We aren't all ordained, but we see ourselves as mediators at the intersection of geek culture and going deeper in our faith. We don't always have to agree, but we do respect each other, and we see everyone as a beloved child of God. Everyone geeks out on something, so come geek out with us and enjoy the show.
You're listening to an Anazao Ministries podcast. Can a TV series help us through life? Hey guys, well, we're going to be getting a little transparent this episode, maybe a little personal, as we discuss times in our lives where we've related to How I Met Your Mother and how it's helped us cope with some of our real world feelings and life situations. Guys, I'm Joshua Noel, really excited to be on this with two fantastic guests. You know both of them. One of them was one of the original hosts of our show, the one and only Brandon Knight. I'm also here with the one and only Father Jonathan. He's been on the show a few times before as well, most recently to talk about Taylor Swift. All right. So before we do anything else, just a second to discuss what we've been geeking out on. A lot recently. I've actually restarted watching Smallville from the beginning. Oh, that one. Another host of our show, Kevin, started doing that this year. He has never seen it before, and I was like, I missed that show. So that's where I'm at. Brandon, what you been geeking out on?
I think I would rewatch those early seasons. I don't know if I would do all the way through, but like super young Tom Welling would probably be fun to see at this point now. As for me, when I'm not watching children's television programming, just finished Aquanauts Above and Beyond. So, you know, if you ever wanted to see Star Trek, but for children, go check out the Octonauts. But for me, I have been working on the Netflix documentary series, The Keepers. It came out a couple years ago, just finally getting around to it. It's a true crime about the murder of a nun and how it turns out to be like this big cover up by not only that regional portion of the Catholic Church out in Baltimore, but also like the police department and the local government. Like it's a whole thing.
All right. That's might check that one out too. Father Jonathan Resmini, what have you been geeking out on?
I started rewatching the Netflix like Marvel shows, but I did it out of order for whatever reason. So like when there's crossovers, like they're happening out of sequence. So I did. For some reason I wanted to watch The Punisher, and then that made me want to watch Daredevil, and then I'm like, well, I guess I should watch Jessica Jones, and then once I finish that, I'll do the Iron Fist because it was like not my favorite because I just think he's like, do you know when like characters just never evolve and they're always the same, and it's just annoying because they keep repeating the same mistakes. And it's okay when it's like when it's a long series because like you understand, but like it's a short series, like it's meant to give them a chance to develop. Like it's long enough where they should be able to develop a character, but like not so long where they have to drag it out forever. So anyways, that's what I've been watching lately.
Yeah, man, I miss those shows other than Iron Fist. But man, David Tennant, Jessica Jones, that was geek heaven when that first happened. I still love it, but man, good stuff. All right. Well, guys, hey, if you're listening to this or watching this, rate and review. You know, if you're on your computer, you can go over to podchaser.com. That really helps our show a lot when you rate and review over there. If you're on Spotify, you can do the 5 stars. If you just hit the little like 3 dot thing, it lets you rate. Apple Podcasts, scroll down to the bottom, rate and review on there. And if you're on YouTube, you gotta smash that like and subscribe button. Because remember, if you don't smash the like and subscribe, you are smashing Will's heart. Nobody wants to do that. We all love Will. And And of course, if we get 50 likes on a video, Will promises to put out a video of himself frolicking through flowers, and I need that. So 50 people, please like this. Of course, we got to thank one of our supporters, Russell Gentry. If you guys want a shout out, you want to be like Russell, you can support our show on Captivate, Patreon, or Apple Podcast. And now, on to the main event. We're talking about How I Met Your Mother. First things first, let's talk about some of our own history for those who don't know, and how many times we think we've seen the series all the way through. Brandon and I have talked about How I Met Your Mother on the show before. It's been a while, but we've done it before, so I'm going to throw it to Father Jonathan first. What is your history with How I Met Your Mother, and how many times do you think you've seen the show all the way through?
I think I started watching it like after maybe the first season or something like that. It was like I was might have been walking through the dorms or something. It was on. I started watching it, and so when I had an opportunity to go back and watch that early season or the early couple seasons, I did. And then I think I've watched it one time after that, hoping for a different experience. And then I just recently, because it was brought up that we might do this, I started watching it again, but I kind of did it out of sequence again. No, infamous, I guess, for that. But I just kind of like wanted to watch particular things.
That's great.
But I went in looking to see how it made sense as a show, as opposed to like the knee-jerk reaction I had when I first watched it, and even the second time through. So much different experience.
Interesting. Yeah. A lot of people didn't love how it ended. I think that's like a lot of the knee-jerk reaction. It was funny though, because when I watched season 1, I was like, oh, I bet it ends like this. And then it did. So I just wasn't surprised. I was like, oh, okay. I wish it would have been surprising. That would have been more fun. But for me, I really feel like this is one of the best well-written shows. Just because it's very well-rounded. It does a lot of foreshadowing, a lot of puns, and there's a lot of just hidden stuff that you just don't realize is there all the way from the beginning. Even how Barney does say please every single time they ask about his job is please. And they just set up that joke for like 10 years and finally delivered on it. And you're like, wow, that was, man, some forethought. And there's a lot of stuff like that. Like, yeah. And if you understood biblical hermeneutics by watching My Seminary Life, you might understand my How I Met Your Mother better also. No, I think it's a great series. Sure. It's always good for a laugh. The first time I watched it was in college because everybody else was watching it and I wanted to be one of the cool kids. And I went back to it almost like comfort food. Like I was going through like hard times. And I was like, I know what I want to watch. How I Met Your Mother. And I've probably seen it all the way through 5 or 6 times if I had to guess. I've seen it a lot. And I don't know. I've probably seen certain seasons and parts of it more than others. Specifically, some of the married, like whenever they're getting married, I've seen a few of those a few times. And for whatever reason, I have rewatched where Marcel loses his dad. I watched that season a lot, I feel like. So that's one for me. Brandon, what is your history with My Seminary Life? With How I Met Your Mother? How many times have you seen the series all the way through?
I created it 3 years ago. My history with How I Met Your Mother was here. I think I was also in college when I started watching it. My roommate was watching it. I think the first episode I ever saw was the Woo Girl episode. I think that was the first one I ever saw, which is a pretty funny episode to like get introduced into, like it's not maybe necessarily the best by way of the overarching like story, but by way of like, oh, this is a pretty funny show. Lily, I've been saying we need a Woo Girl in our group for years, and you have been hiding a whole gaggle of them on me. Like it's just been like it's a really funny episode to get started in. I think in all, it's been like 3 times. I think it's been 3 times all the way through. And you brought up, Josh, how like there's been certain chunks you rewatch, maybe not the entire thing, but certain chunks. Sometimes right around the holidays, my wife and I will turn on all the Christmas episodes or all the Thanksgiving and see all the Slapsgiving episodes, just kind of depending on our mood.
Every year I watch one of the Slapsgivings. Those are great. I think it's weird. This show was put out in such an interesting time because it was like right when Netflix is getting popular enough that shows are able to do more coherent storylines because people don't have to worry about missing an episode. They can just go back and watch it. But also on that tail end where shows still did more like single episodes that made sense on their own. Like you didn't have to watch all of it. So it was an interesting time in like storytelling for TV. And also a lot of the jokes made here would not be allowed to make ever again. This is the end of these kind of jokes. And for better or worse, you know, like some of it I'm like, yeah, Barney goes a little too far. It's hard to watch it now because you're like, I don't know if that's actually not funny. Whereas when I first watched it, it was hilarious. Now I'm like, no, that's not funny. So yeah, it's just an interesting time when it came out. Y'all have any thoughts about that, or move into the main topic?
Yeah, I mean, well, at least with the last thing you said, like, of course, I mean, that reality is true. Kind of like a lot of older sitcoms, like if you even like going back to like some of the '90s sitcoms and stuff like that, like some of the topics and dialogue and stuff, it's just it's reflective of the time. I think it's possible to go back and watch and kind of place it in that context. And like, but even in the show, like there's like later seasons, they start to realize that reality is changing around them. Like there's that one where like with the bar fights or whatever, where they don't have bar fights anymore about trivia because they could just look it up on their phone. Like it aged through that time with us, and and they kind of watched the culture shift and realities change.
Yeah, well, it's actually funny you bring that up because one of my favorite episodes to rewatch are when they're trying to find the burger place with the magical burgers and they can't find it. And it's so funny because like in the same show that exists, and eventually they get to the point where we could just look stuff up with our phones, and you're like, man, if only y'all had that when you were looking for that burger spot. Reddit definitely has an answer to that question. Oh man,
some of the jokes even within the show, like what was funny earlier on, like is not, they kind of like make it clear it's not anymore. Like I can remember pretty early on in the show there's like homophobic style jokes, but then by the later on there's like this joke where there's like this part where I think Marshall and Ted are pretending to be a couple to like look at a house or something, and like Barney is like, why are you doing this? And they're like, are you, and they're like trying to make him look like the homophobic one. So it's even like a little bit of an adjustment as the show kind of goes on as well. I see How I Met Your Mother as kind of like the next evolution in like with the show Friends. Like from Friends, you get How I Met Your Mother as kind of like the better version of Friends. But, you brought up Barney as kind of like this character, right. Like, oh man, there's just some stuff about Barney that just like does not work in 2024. I really like another great sitcom, New Girl. Schmidt is kind of like the transitional Barney character. Like in really early episodes of New Girl, Schmidt is basically Barney, but they like rework him and like position him as like not quite as much as a womanizer as he is just like kind of a dork, kind of a pretentious dork, and it still works really well. So yeah, it's just interesting to see how shows grow and progress.
Oh yeah. Well, and then How I Met Your Mother also does this thing of like it's written in such a way where you can interpret it multiple kinds of ways. So I think that helps with some of the longevity of it, because there are like, hey, you realize that Barney, everything he does in the show is told from the perspective of Ted, who was very jealous of Barney for marrying Robin. And you're like, oh yeah, that's right. And you're like, I wonder how much of this is exaggerated. And like, I've seen a lot of theories about that online. And then even with that, like you were talking about like in show changes, by the end, it's like it's revealed Barney's trauma is what led him to that. It's not like he's just a bad person. He's not simply a womanizer. He's a womanizer because these terrible things happened to him. Doesn't justify it, but it does show it as, hey, this is a bad thing that happened because other bad things happen. And I don't know. It's interesting how they contextualize it and give you enough wiggle room where you're like, okay, I can't watch this all the time because this is still hard to watch, but it's not justifying Barney's actions, I don't think. Yeah. That could be its own episode. How do we view Barney's actions? That's a whole thing. But there is one episode of How I Met Your Mother that inspired this episode of Systematic Ecology. And that is the episode where Stella is introduced to Star Wars. I'm not going to give a ton of context. Girl that Ted is dating, potentially going to marry, we find out has never seen Star Wars. Ted and Stella act like it's no big deal. Marshall, the best friend, the greatest. He's like, wait a minute. What do you mean she's never seen Star Wars? I love that. His words to Ted are funnier than his words to Stella. His words to Ted, he's like, what? The only people who haven't seen Star Wars are the people who are in Star Wars because they lived it. They lived the Star Wars, Ted. And he's so great. It's so great. You're like, wow, this is just like a hardcore Star Wars fan. This is hilarious. But then later, when Ted's trying to get her to watch it and she won't pay attention and she's doing whatever, Marshall has a speech to Stella of why this actually is important to Ted that to me actually made a little bit of sense. And I also might have tested my wife with it when we got married. Because she also had not seen Star Wars till after we got married. Or right when we got married, around that time. But Marshall says to Stella, he goes, do you know how Ted watches Star Wars? He watches it in sickness and in health. He watches it in good times and in bad times. He watches it and he goes through the whole spiel, and it's funny, but you're also like, wait a minute. There's some truth to that, right? Like to some extent, if these stories, these things that I lean on aren't relatable to you at all, it does become a challenge for a relationship. Like I think relationships can overcome whether or not you like Star Wars. Let me be clear. You can overcome that. But there is an extent that we lean on these TV series, these movies in different parts of our lives. I know I watch Indiana Jones every single year. If you don't like Indiana Jones, at least some part of me is being held back from you. Like case in point, Indiana Jones. But How I Met Your Mother is another one of those. When I was getting ready to get married, and we're going to talk about some of these more in detail, but I remember I rewatched the married episodes of the wedding episodes of How I Met Your Mother. When my grandfather passed, I rewatching Marshall going through his dad's loss. Like, to some extent, these shows, these movies, they're not the Bible. They're not what we base our faith off of, but we do tend to go back to them time and time again. Father Jonathan, what do you think? Do you go back to any shows and movies? I mean, other than How I Met Your Mother, that you're just like, this is something I lean on sometimes?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a reasonable thing because, like, especially like movies from like movies and TV shows from like your formative years, or that like were part of you when you were in a particularly emotionally challenging or charged time in your life. I mean, at the same time, they're like the reverse is that is like there are certain shows that like I'll never watch again because of its association with certain people. And I didn't even finish watching the series for that, like because of how connected it was. I think part of it is especially now when I like go back and to like things that I did like say binge watch when I when that was like available to me. You form like a far greater emotional attachment to the characters. There's a degree to which that even when a show ends, there's like an experience of almost grief or loss. Like you want to. That's where like I think the idea of fan fiction comes from. Is they want more story. They like that. Like it doesn't just the lives don't just end. So you want to know what's beyond it. And things like Star Wars have like these little like the expanded universe stuff and like the new shows, and even if it's like we don't like it all that much, there's still a degree to which like the fact that it's in the same universe makes it feel like you're back there, or even although like it didn't land well, like the fact that there was a sequel series on Hulu and like some of the characters came back. It's like, oh, this is the same universe. It's like they're trying to be updated. It didn't land well because they didn't like recreate certain aspects of How I Met Your Mother. But like most definitely when you like because of that maybe emotional connection, because you spend so much time, especially a series that long, like there's a way in which it's like when you haven't seen a friend in a while and like you can go back to it and it's just like it was, even though you've changed a little bit, or you come back and you're a little different, but there's something nostalgic and familiar about it. And I think that's happened a lot when I've gone back to watch like meaningful media from my past.
Yeah. Man, the way you were talking about that too. How I Met Your Father was not what I wanted it to be. And that made me sad because I was excited for more. But sometimes I think we make some of those connections with the actors as also, right? Like every time I see the actor that plays Marshall, I get so excited because to me, Marshall's like my best friend. I've never met him, obviously, but I'm like, I love this guy. Like I relate to him. And we talked about Jessica Jones earlier, David Tennant. Anytime I see David Tennant, because of how much those episodes of Doctor Who meant to me, I feel like there's some connection there. Even though I've never met him, he obviously would not know who I am. But whenever he's on something, there's something about his personality that comes out that I'm like, hey, this was something that I connected to during these parts of my life that feels very real, even though it's obviously not a real relationship, but it is something. There is something there. I don't know what, but there's something there. Brandon, do you have any commentary or explanations on this phenomena?
Sure, I could talk about stuff that has become kind of like a, comfort shows that are movies that become rewatchable. Although I'm really stuck on what Father Jonathan said about fan fiction. Like there's a lot. I agree with him and I love it. That's why it's stuck on me with that. Trying to think. So like I would know for me, like I'm sure for a lot of people, like with the holidays, like Christmas time, there's like those things that you have to watch or else it doesn't feel like Christmas. For me, that's the Charlie Brown Christmas special or like A Christmas Story, which is like from my hometown. It's like if I want to watch those closer to Christmas, but if I wait too long, then like all of December doesn't feel like Christmas. I have to like watch those earlier and then it feels like Christmas. With my son now, I talked about how I'm like watching kids programming with my son and like I weed out the ones that I find very annoying, but some of them are like, he loves Bear in the Big Blue House. We showed him that from our childhood. I showed him that since it's on Disney Plus and like, he loves it. And so we rewatch Bear in the Big Blue House now together. And it's just kind of like this, bonding experience, passing like something I love down to him kind of thing. And then my wife and I was trying to think like what shows have Claire and I rewatched together a lot? And the answer is not many. We rewatch comedy specials because the nice thing about comedy specials is that like you're in, you're out, 1 hour, it's done. And so, like, we very frequently rewatch John Mulaney's stand-up specials on Netflix or Jim Gaffigan's, like, and this is just like has become truly like the shared like comfort food for us of like we're stressed. Cooper was a handful. She had a long day at work. Let's just let's watch Mr. Universe and have a good laugh at Jim Gaffigan making jokes about whales, and it will be better. Tomorrow will be better.
Yeah.
Hello, friends. If you enjoy Systematic Ecology, a great way to support us and to keep us moving forward into the future is to be a patron on our Patreon network. If you're a Patreon, then you get live access to our YouTube exclusives like Comic Book Ketchup and Manga Mustard, Drinks with Tejas, and also some extra content there with our companion series to go along with our annual theme. If you're a patron, you get exclusive merch like t-shirts and handbags and mugs. There's also a bonus extra question that has extra content. In each episode, we go deeper into our faith and the questions that we're wrestling with, but we also do this extra question to jump in and share about, and patrons get to hear how we answer that question. There's discounts on our store. You get access to any future online D&D campaigns. You can easily access all of our Patreon content through our Spotify page where it says exclusive content for subscribers. That could be you folks. And all that being said, you get the satisfaction that you help us keep the lights on and keep us moving forward with our software, our marketing, our equipment, staying current in the podcast game. We love Systematic Ecology. We hope you do too. Support us moving forward. Thank you for all that you are. We know there's a lot of great choices and content out there, and you choose to listen to Systematic Ecology. Thanks, folks. We love you. Peace.
Well, and sorry, last thing on this, because it's just interesting how we as humans make connections. I think there's also this thing of like hidden languages that we find in the shows, right? Like I remember being put in a new workplace after being in a bad situation, making a transfer, and then being in the spot, and I feel like I'm all alone. I don't know these people. You're kind of like boxed up, and then someone goes, legend, wait for it, hope you're not lactose intolerant, dairy. And I'm like, oh, wait, now I have a connection point. And all of a sudden I don't feel alone because someone made a reference to this silly TV show. I'm like, oh, I don't feel alone anymore. Or I know me and my brother, we've been in these, with my parents, we're out to eat. And, this was like early on, whenever he just got married and I've been married, and we haven't been like away from each other like that before. We're like, hey, now we're both adults and we're coming together as adults, and this is weird. And there's a little bit of awkwardness. And the waiter goes to take our meal, and I make my, we're getting breakfast. I order everything I order, and my brother looks at me and goes, Josh, I think they might have thought you meant a lot of meat, but what you really said was all of the meat. And I was like, yeah. Then all of a sudden that awkwardness kind of melts away, right? Like these things help us make connections, even if they are just silly TV shows. So I think in some way that's a meaningful part of what it means to be in community. Okay, let's jump to what we told everyone we were going to talk about. So times that we have personally related to this series, or that this series relates to us personally, just broken down to a few different scenarios rather than episodes to just kind of see where we're all at. So first up, marriage or relationships, that kind of stuff, romance. Anybody want to go first? Like, when have you been in a place where you have felt a connection to something that was talked about in How I Met Your Mother? I guess Father Jonathan.
So I think for me, like for a very long time, I felt a little bit like that. Maybe, hopefully, not as pretentious, but like the hopeful romantic. And I was like the last of my group of friends, like, to be in a serious relationship. And and when I think the second time through rewatching it, I was kind of like more in line with their ages and experiencing it. And and then kind of seeing what it's like, and like having the feelings like you're invested in a relationship, and like but then it ends, and like the that having to start over thing that you see with Ted a lot, and so for me it was that kind of like that, like the promise of like that's there will be a mother one day, like kind of kept me going. And I think part of the reason I think I was so disappointed at the end was that like how it ended in particular, and how like it didn't feel like a happily ever after because of what I was looking for out of it. And then like coming out of this side of my relationship ending, and kind of like the like being in a place where life looks a lot different for me than I expected it would. Like this, like me watching an ending like that, like I don't know if I want to say I'm more of a realist. I've lost some of like that hopefulness that I might have had, the thing that made me more like Ted. But at the same time, I also see it, but then I at the same time like see the hopefulness in it, that like even when the worst of things can happen, like there's still more story. And so I think like that aspect of it like really kind of like it really drew me to the show. And it was actually like a welcome thing when like we brought it up, and that we might talk about it, to like revisit it, because I was able to have that experience that I didn't have the last time. I used to like pretend that the alternate ending was the real ending, and now I'm like, you know what, I'm okay. That ending makes sense too. Like that's how messy life is sometimes. And I think it had like I had to be on the other side of a mess to realize that it's okay that we don't watch things that are a fantasy or an idealized version of life. Sometimes it's okay to watch things that are just as messy as reality, like to show that we're not alone in our suffering, or not alone in our difficulties. I think so the three stages of my life when I watched it was kind of in different places, and that's kind of where I've landed on the third time around.
Yeah. This show it's not really deep, but it's very emotional. It's got a large emotional range, and I think that's what I kind of use it for, is just kind of that feeling aspect. I know the first time I watched it, I was very much like a hopeless romantic, and for some reason, I just always wanted Ted to be with Robin. So I was like, I don't like how we got there, but we got there, like cool. And I think it kind of helped in a weird way. It helped justify me because I had certain people that I was like, I'm meant to be with them. And no matter what anybody else says, this is going to be hey, this is how it works. And as some of those dreams and visions got shattered, and I realized maybe got shattered for the better, I don't know. I kind of lost that with Ted. And the more I've rewatched it, the more I'm like, Ted's actually kind of annoying. like Ted doesn't, his personality changes like every other episode. He's annoying. But then Marshall is what I kind of eventually attached to, because I'm like, I get Marshall. Marshall's pursuing his own career. He knows who he loves, who he wants. He's a family guy. And the older I get, the more I'm like, maybe that's it. Maybe I kind of even, I don't personally want kids, but I just kind of want to, see my brother. I want to hang out with my parents. I want to call my dad once a day. I want to be that kind of guy, So I've kind of attached more to him. But ironically, when I was getting married, I couldn't sleep the night before. I watched all of the wedding episodes of How I Met Your Mother, all of them, because I'm a crazy person. And the one that actually changed my vows the night before my wedding was Barney. Because Barney's writing his vows because he's seen how messy relationships can be and all this stuff. And he goes, I don't want to promise you something I can't do. So I'm going to make this promise to you that I'm going to do what's best for you. And to me, that really resonated of like, hey, yeah, I could promise you that I'm always going to be happy and loving. And like, that's probably not true. Sometimes I'm probably going to be angry and say stuff I don't mean. Sometimes this might happen. But what promises can I make? And I don't know, it really challenged me that, hey, I can't promise you that I'll always be the best, but I can promise I'm always going to try to do what I think is best for you. And that level of realism brought by, again, I still think Barney's just a joke character, but in that moment, I think he was really onto something. And it meant a lot to me to kind of see that vulnerability and go, that's what I want. I don't want my vows to be something that sounds grand that I can't live up to. I'd rather it be something vulnerable that's just true. So I don't know. It challenged me in a way that I don't think TV shows usually challenge me, or maybe mean to challenge me. Yeah. Anyway, so it was fun. I don't know. I think for me, in a weird way, it's easier to relate to the show in the sad moments, maybe, even though this was helpful too.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And oftentimes I feel like we're looking for that too. Like it's pretty easy for us to be with joy. Because it's a pleasant experience. And I think when we are having to deal with like the difficult emotions, I don't want to say it's an escape, because I feel like the very act of like going to something that we know brings comfort is a realization of our own need to process. And so I would caution anyone who would think that like someone going to like watching something in the sad moments, it's easier to watch. It's like maybe we connect with it more. Isn't us not feeling our feelings as much as it is us experiencing, maybe not directly from another person, but like experience something empathetic to like knowing that, I'm not the only one who has ever felt that way, because if this is a thing, it means that it's a thing enough that other people will connect with it. So I know that like it's not strange that I feel the way that I feel. It's not ridiculous for me to feel broken up about something, even if like some people around me might think it's not worth getting upset about or something like that.
Yeah. Well, and also, I think maybe this is weird I'm trying to find a way to word this, but like I mentioned, for me, the big one was when one of my grandfathers passed, watching Marshall deal with his dad passing away. It's, I think part of it, because, I'm sitting here watching this TV here, binging multiple episodes of him dealing with his grief, and I'm eating like big bowls of mac and cheese and comfort food. And this is obviously not comforting. Like he's bawling his eyes out. He's going through hell and back in the show. But I think it helped me put words to my feelings. Like sometimes I don't have words for it. And shows like this have whole teams of writers that are coming up with how to word what's going on and how to like figure stuff out. And it's like seeing this puts pictures to what I'm feeling that maybe I can't actualize myself very well because I'm not in the place to do that. So I don't know. I think that's for me. I know you talked some about why we do this as far as it's not really being escapism. Do you have any like for yourself moments in the show that were particularly relatable for you?
Well, I mean, I think just like I think I mentioned it before, just kind of like the like there was aspects of it that like Ted's whole perspective, romantic perspective, but I think like so I went to seminary, but I did it. It was like a 7-year program, and I lived basically in the dorms for 7 years with the same group of guys. Like some of my best friends, um, are guys that I've known since I was 18. Coming up on 20 years now, and we spent like almost every day together because we like you're always in the same classes with people that you come in with, and for 7 years, and we were in each other's weddings and all of that, and like just the idea of the friendship that transcends like the times and seasons of life, and like to see that this even though like in the flash forwards where they go and there's like kind of ridiculous futures, Nessie being discovered and all of that type of stuff. But you see that like even at their old age, they're together, and
Yeah.
like the fact that when even how Ted's telling the story, it's like your Uncle Robin, your Aunt Robin, and then your Uncle Marshall and your Aunt Lily and Uncle Barney. Like these kids obviously know who they are, and you see that with like the ending and stuff like that. Like these are people that have been in each other's lives, for decades. And like to kind of relate to the experience of having friends that like you have inside jokes with, that like
Yeah.
or like all you have to do is like like say one line, and like everyone's on the same page. And like I was just in California for a conference, a clergy and laity conference, that they do every other year for the archdiocese. So priests and lay people from all over the country were there, and like people I went to school with that I haven't seen since the last time we had the conference, and we're just hanging out at the restaurant having conversations. We're going back to like the same old jokes when we sat around the lunch table at seminary, and talking about like our old professors and stuff like that. And it's funny actually. There's a priest who's visiting. He's from my home, the parish I serve, and he's been a priest for 50 years. And he and I had the same professor, which was just amazing. And he was talking about the same things that we used to do in the class. We would do with him. Like they used to go to Dunkin' Donuts, and like we would go to Dunkin' Donuts. That's like a tradition that was passed down to how to deal with this professor. And just
pretty funny.
invited, like say, let's have class at Dunkin' Donuts, and that's what we did. So like it was the wisdom of the ages or something like that. So there's just there's something special about the friendships and the idea that you can be friends for life, with your own inside jokes. I think that really struck me as something meaningful.
Man, yeah, no, that's a good one. And I think that's where, like, in a weird way, now, when I first watched it and I was young and I think romance was the only thing I cared about, was like finding the one day or whatever. The sad moments were all the breakups. But now when I watch it, it's a lot sadder whenever like Barney and Ted, or Ted decides he's no longer talking to Barney. And it's like, you see that like the friendship is in danger. And for some reason, that is what gets me now, that I'm like, oh no. Yeah. I guess as I've grown, rely more on my family and friends and less on, one day maybe I'll find the one. I'm married. My wife is my family now, so family is kind of taking a little bit more of a priority. So, yeah, man, yeah, no, it's good stuff. And I don't want to just sound like downers. You mentioned inside jokes, and I think sometimes we do go to shows like this just for the laughs. Like there are times that maybe if my brother came over, I might just look and be like, what if we watched the Bro Code episode? And we're going to watch that episode where Barney has monks put together a chant, the bro. And for us, that every time, it's going to make me laugh no matter how many times I've seen it. Barney losing the bet and having to wear the duck tie, I lose it every time because Barney so like thinks he's the man, but he has to wear the duck tie. It's so funny. Are there any things like that in the show that you're like, this is where I go to for just a laugh?
Um, yeah, so I think I like the ones where like Marshall is kind of just like being him, like hit like a goofy version of himself, like where
Love
he's
Marshall.
it was like one of the first episodes, or maybe even the first episode when they're like going to the airport, and he and Ted and Barney end up in I forget where they end up, but they end up in another state,
Yeah.
and Marshall's like driving, and then they keep like, come on, go, come, go, and he keeps like turning around, but he's like singing as he does it, and so like that just set the
Love
stage
Marshall.
for just like when those moments, like when he just sings things, or uh just like him being goofy, I think is really like it's like a comforting thing. So I don't know if there's like a specific episode, but like I always like look forward to that in the particular episode.
Yeah, yeah. I I think one of my favorite Marshall things that I've thought about doing this myself, and I know that that's silly, but I forget why. Everyone shows up, and it's Marshall and Lily are in their sleep attire, and Marshall is wearing a sleeping gown, like an
Yeah.
old man, and Barney's making fun of him. And Marshall's like, "Try it. It's like flying." And Barney tries, Barney has literally a sleep suit. His pajamas are also just a suit that's meant for
Yeah.
sleeping. And Barney tries it. He's like, why have I been missing out on this? And Marshall, like, I don't know. It's just so funny the way Marshall presents it. And the actor is just so funny, like in his presentation. And I also have always wanted to try one. I'm like, I kind of want a sleeping gown with a little hat and everything, Like, I got to know what it's like to sleep like that once. Oh man, no, it's good stuff though. All right, do you have any other moments in How I Met Your Mother that you just like to go back to, or that are just stand out to you as meaningful in some way or funny?
I don't know about like meaningful, but like one of the things I did in anticipation of our conversation is um like like following the trail through the seasons, like I think I started when I went on YouTube. It's like all the slaps, because I just wanted to see them, because
The
it's
slaps
like
are great.
yeah, and so like that was like that was fun, or like like just going through and seeing compilations of like funny recurring jokes in the series. Like there's something about like the fact that there's enough forethought in the writers' minds to like make these connections. I'm like, it reminded me, there was like an episode of, this wasn't the How I Met Your Mother, it was like Family Guy, and they have to go in witness protection, and Peter paints his car to look like the General Lee from Dukes of Hazzard, and then Brian goes to jump in, but the window is rolled up, and then like 2 seasons later, he like hits Peter with a chair or bat and goes, "That's for not rolling down the windows in the General Lee." And there's just like something like where there's like a continuity
Yeah.
from one thing to the other that just like it feels like it's a connected world, which you didn't always get. I think you led with this early on in our conversation, where you talked about how things could be kind of independent and about nothing, like the Seinfeld-esque thing, where you don't actually, like, you don't have to know anything about the
Mhm.
story. You could watch any season, any episode, and you're fine, because it's just that's what that day is about. But there's something to be said about like this kind of development of story, and like reoccurring characters that come back, and you know, and just like little things, like he drops the name of the mother and the kids get scared, but it's not really the person, like the exotic dancer, but it is the same name. Like they decided, oh, we're gonna keep that, you know.
Yeah, that was funny.
Um,
Yeah, the goat, that was always funny. They kept doing like, this was the year of the goat. It's like, oh wait, no, it wasn't. And then eventually the goat actually happened, and you're like, oh, it was a good payoff. I love when they did stuff like that.
the cockamouse or whatever. That
Yeah,
was
the
a good one.
mouse. Man, another one I watched just for laughs. Sometimes I'll go back and watch the scuba diver episode where
Oh yeah.
Barney is just dressed as a scuba diver, and he's like, hey, it's like, it turns out it was a whole plan, and the writing on that episode was pretty great. I love that. And then another one, I don't go back for meaning of it, but I feel like helped me learn a life lesson. Um, there was the episode where Lily is putting together, Marshall's like doing something for his law school exam, working his butt off and doing all this stuff. And Lily's putting together the perfect Christmas party for when he comes back. But then she overhears an old message from when they broke up, and he called her a bad word. And she gets so upset. She packs all this stuff up and moves out, and Marshall has to do all this stuff. And eventually he gets her forgiveness again. But it was just kind of this recall to me, like, hey, yeah, sometimes when we're in a fight, there are still lines. Like, you can't just say whatever to whoever, like you have to be aware that the moment you win is a moment, and you don't want to say something that you don't mean that might haunt you after that moment. And I don't know, that for me was like one of those realization of, oh, hey, that's something that really could happen. So yeah, no, it's good stuff. There's a lot of stuff in here. We talked about it earlier, but I kind of want to get just your take as a minister. We're Christians who think about these kind of things. Is it okay that we sometimes lean on a TV show? Because I know a lot of people are like, the Bible, God should be all sufficient. You shouldn't need anything else. But sometimes, I sit there and watch Marshall's Lost with a big thing of mac and cheese. Was that bad? Should I only pray, or is it okay that we use these secular things also to help us in some of our times of need?
Yeah, I mean, I think like as Christians, we want to care for all aspects of ourselves. So certainly, we don't want to neglect the spiritual wounds that we have by doing this. That's why I say it shouldn't be necessarily seen as escapism from our experience, but it can be, and so we just have to be intentional about it. But I mean, I might be biased because I used to give talks around the country on pop culture and spirituality. Like it's my thing. But I come from a tradition that where even the things like the classical Greek mythology was seen as something that we could read to learn, whether it's learn positive virtue, or to learn, what not to do. And there's this imagery of the bee versus the fly. The bee seeks out the good pollen in something, and the fly will just go to trash heaps and dung and all of that, and doesn't care for the good stuff. And then from that good pollen, the bee creates something sweet and medicinal even. And so I want to say that it's certainly okay. I think we have to I would say, as someone who kind of sees what I do as kind of soul therapy and spiritual healing, spiritual medicine, I feel like it is okay as long as it's not the only thing, and as long as it is not any type of escapism or avoidance of what you're going through. I think also I'll be mindful, maybe binge culture isn't always the best. I mean, I grant that I live alone, I come home from work and I don't really want to do much socializing, but there's something that feels a little social about watching a good show where you're seeing a group of people that is meaningful to you in some way. So my spiritual father, the person I go to for spiritual counseling and direction, always always said that everything needs to be done in moderation. We have to we don't want to be extreme in anything. So I think that's kind of the approach. Yes, do it. Because you can even be extreme in your religiosity, and it becomes detrimental. So being mindful of that. There's a Russian monk, bishop, where we have a record of a correspondence he had with one of his spiritual charges, who asked why is it that when people become more religious, they become worse people? It's because they worship everything but God, and about religion kind of thing, the stuff that you do, the going to church, the this and that, that stuff can become an idol if we stop seeing it as a tool to grow in our relationship with God and see it as an end in and of itself. So being mindful of moderation, even in our religiosity, is important. So I think that using something that can either tell us what is good or what is bad. And I think I remember having a conversation with a friend of mine who's a priest now, where he said that for him he didn't like Friends, but he liked Seinfeld because Seinfeld was a moral universe,
Yeah.
and Friends wasn't. They just slept around with each other, traded partners, were selfish, all of those things, which you
Mm.
kind of see in How I Met Your Mother a
Yeah.
little bit, but I think there's a little bit better because there are redeeming qualities and self-sacrifice and different things like that. But
Yeah.
Seinfeld, they literally go to jail for the things that they were doing that were selfish throughout the series. Like that's how the series ends. They break a good Samaritan law by not helping someone, and then they go on trial, and they all end up in the last episode is them in prison for a year for breaking that law, for the very thing that they've done the whole series. And I just remember thinking that was like profound. Like, if there's something that we can learn about, like positive, or that it's clearly presented in a way that it is not okay, like you see the fault in it it's not like glorified, but you see like how, like Barney's womanizing or whatever. One, we see the trauma, like you said before, that led to it, and two, we see his redemption in
Yeah.
becoming a father. And it wasn't until he could understand what he was doing to someone else's child that he could,
Mm.
that like it was able to change, and he was actually able to like make a promise like he couldn't make, like the one you mentioned before with Robin. Like he could make that promise of forever to his daughter because like something changed in him, in her, like in beholding her. And so like you
Yeah.
see that everything before was wrong. Like even like jokingly, he like starts like he changes the interaction. You think he's going to have the same interaction with like a young person in the bar at the end, and then he just like scolds them, for for their life choices. Like, and it's interesting. Like you see that, and you
Yeah.
know. Now, Ted, I don't know if Ted actually undergoes any degree of transformation, but
Yeah.
partially
That
it's
sucks.
because like I think like you could lean into the idea that like Ted is telling the story as future Ted. So the version
Yeah.
of himself that he's presenting is the version of himself that he wants to present.
Mm.
And so he's not going to change because he's the one telling the story. Like that is how he sees himself,
Yeah.
so to speak.
Oh man. Yeah. No, that's good. I didn't think about it like that. But no, Barney's changes. Oh man, it's one of the biggest ones, and it's hard. I actually have a Barney Stinson Funko Pop on top of my bookshelf. That's over there. But yeah, no, all that's good. I think when I get to like the question of like the Bible being all sufficient, I think it is sufficient to answer our questions or to help us ask better questions, maybe depending on the day that you ask me how I would phrase that. But I'm afraid that a lot of people, especially in Protestant camps, I could talk about Protestants because I am one. They think sometimes there's this temptation of putting God in a box. Like everything about God is just in the Bible, and that's all I need. If I'm sad, I should just read Lamentations over and over and over. Right? And I don't think anyone ever quite takes it to that extreme. But it's almost talked about like that. Like the Bible should be my sufficient. I shouldn't need to lean on anything else. But rather, I think the Bible's a good tool for building my relationship with God. But to just leave God there, I think, is actually belittles God more than it uplifts the Bible or anything. And I think there's this thing of like the creativity in humans is a reflection of the creativity of our God and his love. So I think in a lot of ways, engaging with art, even non-Christian art, can help us see something of the divine, even if it's not a direct, hey, this is what God believes. Here's what Jesus wants you to do. It's still a reflection of something that is true about the divine. I can find it in good works of art, maybe not all works of art, but good works of art. I think it does kind of reflect that part of who God is.
Yeah. I think you and I have had a conversation on the other podcast about the value of art in our religious and spiritual experience. So I think that that there's a reason why and there's a reason why faith is communicated often through story, and to understand that there's wisdom to be gleaned in a life well lived, and so turning to turning to stories of others, and even if they're like, made up stories. I'm reminded of like there was a book that was written by John of Damascus, like an 8th, 9th century saint, and it was called the story of what was it? Barlam and Joseph. And you read it, and if you have any knowledge of religion, it's like really it's familiar, and it's because he retells the story of Siddhartha Buddha as if it's a Christian monk explaining reality to a ruler, and and so it's like, and the funny thing is like they've been like those two characters have been like they're considered saints in the Orthodox tradition, even though they probably didn't exist. But the idea is like the truth of that story like was worth communicating. Like he saw value in like kind of the context of the story of Siddhartha Buddha that he heard, and so therefore he said, well, what would this story look like if I were to communicate Christian truth, kind of thing. And so like utilizing imagery that people are familiar with, and like early church fathers and mothers utilized classical works to articulate things. So I think in general, even Christ himself used story to communicate truth. So like I think we're not living in a time when the agricultural metaphors make sense to us necessarily. So finding new metaphors to communicate the same truth is important. I think that's a lot of times what pastors end up doing anyways, is they're like, they're trying to present the truth of the gospel in imagery that makes sense for a 21st century audience, which isn't necessarily spreading seeds on the field or something like that, or one of the other parables. Like we don't get that, but we can get the concept maybe. So like the kingdom of heaven might be like a story from a TV show that we saw, because it still communicates the same truth.
Yeah. I think personally, just to go along with that, the way that Marshall loves Ted, even though Ted keeps doing the same stupid stuff over and over and over, and the way that Marshall holds the whole group together, Barney included, and all the terrible stuff that Barney does, Marshall's character challenges me, even though he is not real. So I do think, just going along with what you're saying, like that art really does paint maybe a sort of parable. Maybe the kingdom of God is like people who are like Marshall, but I don't know. I think that is a good way of looking at it, and it can help us. And just like you said, shouldn't be the main thing, but it is a good thing. Yeah. All right. Well, do you have anything else you want to add before we wrap this up?
No, nothing in particular.
All right. Here we go. With that, then, guys, we won't be doing a bonus question this time simply because I have another recording that already started. So we're going to jump into recommendations. For me, it's hard. I'm just going to recommend what I'm geeking out on. If you haven't seen Smallville, watch Smallville. I forgot how good it was, but it is a lot of fun. Father Jonathan, you have anything you'd like to recommend to the audience?
So I did, like I said, I was watching those Marvel Netflix shows, but I think there's two other Netflix shows that I kind of like. I actually watched a couple times through. One is The Recruit, I think, and the other one, I forget the title, but it's another kind of espionage type type TV show. It's on Netflix. If you like search that type of thing, it'll come up, and it's basically about a guy trying to figure out like a plot for like a terrorist attack and an assassination attempt. So definitely worth watching it. The story kind of builds up in an interesting way, and kind of like the way they play with time and the storytelling is really cool. So.
Ooh, man, sorry, I love time stories. But yeah, guys, Brandon Knight did drop off. He had some Wi-Fi issues and stuff, but I do got to recommend you check out his show, My Seminary Life. The week we're recording this, and I think the week it comes out, he's doing a hermeneutics camp. So he's doing 5 days in a row to talk about hermeneutics in the month of July. So, hey, if you want to learn more about how to read your Bible well and what hermeneutics are, go check out Brandon Knight on My Seminary Life. Remember, again, you can help our show by rating and reviewing on Podchaser, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts. Smash the like and subscribe button so you're not smashing Will's heart, and so that we can get Will frockling through flowers on the show. Be like Russell, support the show on Apple Podcasts, Patreon, or Captivate. And remember, we're all a chosen people, a geekdom of priests.
Hey guys, Christian here to talk to you about the AMP Network. That is the Anazao Ministries Podcasting Network. That's what we do for all of us here together. You can follow the whole network in a single feed on Spotify at Anazao Ministries Podcast or on the network page on Apple Podcasts to just see what we're all doing. And what are we doing? Well, we have plenty of things here. We've got the homily. You love Pastor Will. You want to hear Pastor Will preach. You hear the man doing a homily there. It's amazing. The man does spectacular work for Holy Trinity Lutheran Church in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Then we have the Whole Church podcast. If you want to hear Joshua and TJ talk to different people from around the church who have very different views on how things should go, check it out there. If you want to go to My Seminary Life, you want to get some more Brandon Knight in your life, who doesn't want more of that? Go there, hear about the man, discuss his time at seminary, which is what he used to do. Now he's on other topics, and just head out there for what the rest of the man can do. Hear a lot of good stuff that way. Now you can head over to Let Nothing Move You. That's my podcast where I go through the Bible chapter by chapter, verse by verse. I started with Luke, then I went to Romans. Now I'm in Genesis, and I'm moving on from there. It's a good time if you want to hear how I view the Bible, how things should go there. You can do that. You can go to Dummy for Theology, where you can hear Joshua Noel discuss the various theological topics that he has there in an attempt to show every side of the big discussions, leaving you with more questions and answers. If that infuriates you like me, but you still want to listen, head out that way. You can go to the Bible After Hours. We have the foul-mouthed preacher there, and he's going to deliver things that not ready for every ear to hear, but sometimes you need someone to be a little filthy out there just to give a more progressive view of the church, to challenge the status quo of what is happening here. Do you agree with him? Do you not like him? How are you going to know if you don't listen to him? And finally, we have save best for last, the Clydes. Taylor and Elizabeth Clyde. You need some more pangalangin in your life, like all of us do, then head out there, see what's going on in their own life, in their own ministry, so you can hear the devotions and everything going on in their lives. Once again, it's the Anazao Ministries Podcasting Network, AMP, and we love you guys. See you next time.
Hi, my name is TJ. I'm here to tell you about the Systematic Geekology shop. That's where we post all of our merch. It is hosted on Creator Spring, and we have a ton of really cool merch, mostly clothing. We have hats, extra soft t-shirts, sweaters, hoodies, and more. Our hosts wear them all the time. It's actually super comfy. We have glassware, mugs, which everybody loves a good mug. Fill out your cupboard, get rid of some old ones, which is the part that I never do. That's why I have too many cups. We have cloth bags, posters, and it's really stuff. We like to put our icons on there. We like to put quotes, things we've come up with. And it's cool. It's a cool way, and a lot of it is pretty subtle too, to show support for one of your favorite shows. And my personal favorite is actually our SG dad cap, which I have been reluctant to buy it because now I have to wear hats at work, and then I get tired of wearing hats. But it's really cool. It's really understated. It is our logo right here, and then it says Systematic Geekology on the back. It's great. It's a really good hat. We have a few of them floating around. Check it out. And if we could all just rock the SG dad cap in public, I think that'd be pretty sweet.